What is up, YouTube? It's your boy Millsy, back with Hometown Commander, back for another episode of Let's Playtest, the show where I live stream, hang out with y'all, and playtest some decks. Remember this? This series is a continuation of what we love to do on the channel with Millsy Brews, playtesting decks and talking about it. I'll give the same caveats I always do about playtesting. Remember, the goal is not to find magical Christmas land. It's not just to show off all our best plays and talk about all the great things our decks can do. But it's just to get in some gameplay scenarios, kind of catch some hands, and see how we would set up our board state. Obviously, not being able to always simulate our opponents, right? And I think that's the key thing. Is that we want to play test from a position of knowing what we're going to do. And then when we get into gameplay scenarios based upon what our opponents do, right, then we can better determine, right, what the plan is, right, and how we're going to do that. Tonight, we're going to do a mix of an old commander and a new commander. The funny part about that caveat is that both of these are old commanders. In fact, both of these commanders are at least 2 years old in their printings. But Jetmir is a deck that I've had around for a long time. It's one of my personal favorites. It's a deck that continues growing for me, but I really enjoy it. It's a tokens deck. It's a mid-range deck. It looks to hit our opponents hard, and we get to have fun with it. In the new one today that we're going to talk about is actually coming up for the channel at the time that this live stream is going out. Members will be able to see this episode, but it'll be going out this week. We're going to talk about Captain Nagathrod. Now, Captain Nagatrod's a commander that I did put through the paces a little bit when it first released, and it was a deck I had fun with. I thought it was an interesting deck. I kind of like the idea of pairing Mill with a tribal deck. I'm a known lover of tribal decks, and so I thought this would be cool. You know, and horrors are such an interesting creature type. There's some random, right? Some of them are really fun, and Wizards has printed a bunch of new ones and did a really good job at reprinting a couple cool ones in the precon that Nagathrod came in. So the interesting part is that it was an interesting commander to begin with. And then, you know, over the last couple sets, we've really gotten a lot of interesting mill support, right? You got probably one of the best pieces of mill support we've seen in a long time in the Water Crystal, right? An artifact that says if an opponent would mill one or more cards, they mill that many +4 instead, which may not seem like a lot to you in at first glance, but remember that even if you're milling somebody for 2 or 3 cards, you know, turning into 7 or 8 is a huge deal if you can do that repeatedly. And I think that's what this deck is trying to do, is basically just siphon cards out of our opponents. The only difference as the deck currently sits in front of me to the one that's releasing on the channel this week is mainly the land base. I added a few things in this list that aren't in the deck that posted. You know, a shock and fetch, the Mirza Karlov Manor Surveil land, and I think that's really it. I think Cavern as well. So a few differences from the deck that went out on the channel, but very, very similar. So remember, Nagathrod, 5 mana, Dimir, 3/6. All of our horrors have a menace. Whenever a horror we control hits a player in combat, that player mills that many cards. So great start, right? Especially if our horrors can be big or have great abilities when they hit our opponents. But why we want Nagathrod out is its bottom ability. At the beginning of our end step, we can choose an artifact or creature that was put into an opponent's graveyard from their library this turn and put it into the battlefield under our control. Now, it's important to note that Nagathrod doesn't require the card to have been milled from a horror hitting an opponent. I think this is a huge deal because it would make it harder to accomplish, but I think it's a big deal because then we can play more traditional mill cards alongside of our horrors and basically just get the best of both worlds, right? And I think we can just kind of create this ecosystem where we just hope to mill our opponents for some really great things. I got the chance to play a game with Captain this weekend over at a friend's house with the list that sits in front of me. And I was really impressed at how much you don't realize picking an artifact or creature can really matter. Just in the 1 or 2 games I played with Nagathrod, I was able to pick up something like Gisela or a One Ring out of somebody's graveyard. So you could start to see, like, we're getting an artifact or a creature is a really huge deal. And as much as I want to playtest this right and have fun and talk about the deck, we still have to keep the caveat that, like, I don't know what my opponents are going to mill, and a lot of my decisions may depend on what does my opponent give me. If an opponent gives me, for example, something like Gisela, well, I don't know that I really want to attack that player. I want to keep Gisela. I want to keep it out. I want to get the double damage. I want to use it against other people, right? So attacking decisions and all those things are going to change depending on what you get from somebody's graveyard. But I think the core idea of what we're going to still do in our playtest is going to be the same. We're going to try to set up engines to mill our opponents. And of course, every end step, we're just going to pick the best thing we milled that turn, get it under our control, and rectify it right for our game plan. The one thing I think that I misjudged in the episode that's coming out this week, and I wanted to test for myself, was ways to turn the creatures you steal from your opponents into horrors in order to take more advantage of them. Things like Arcane, Adaptation, and Leyline Transformation. I think I undervalued them in the episode, and I think they're important, so I want to add them in here, and I think I would even go one step further, maybe with something like Maskwood Nexus. But that's something that obviously, as we go through testing, right, you could get more from. But if you're in, I'd love to know what you think. Sound off in the comments, chat with me. That's why I'm here. Let's talk. This doesn't have to be a one-way street, but if you want it to be, let's get into some play tests. Here in the first one, we're keeping a 3-lander, which is not the most ideal, right? In the fact that Nagathrod is a 5-mana commander, but we don't mind it. We have a Herald's Horn, so that's at least 4 mana, right? For the purpose of playing our horrors. And we could try to dig for some more. Bloodchief Ascension is probably one of those cards that we would stamp a win con for us. So Bloodchief Ascension says at the beginning of each end step, when an opponent lost 2 or more life this turn, you get to put a quest counter on it. So just like a lot of the other Ascension enchantments, something has to happen, and if you do, you get a counter on it. And then once you hit a certain amount of counters, you get an effect. So for Bloodchief Ascension, whenever a card is put into an opponent's graveyard from anywhere, if it has 3 or more quest counters on it, we can have that player lose 2 life. And if we do, we gain 2 life. This is a massive deal because if you could turn Bloodchief Ascension online, basically, I really only got to build 20 cards, right? If somebody's sitting at full life. And I got to see this the other night in the games that I played. I got to mill somebody out for 10 and deal 20 to them and end their, and basically siphon their life out. But Ascension's a really good card. I'm not playing any way to find it, but if we can find it, I think it's really good and really worth, right, our time. We see Fractured Sanity, a way to mill each opponent for 14 cards. 14 cards is a lot to start choosing from. And then we have a fun top-end card like Breach the Multiverse. We're about 1 land away from being in really good shape with Nagathrod. And I think we'll just hope to find some more things. Again, Fractured Sanity can still trigger Nagathrod's bottom ability, so we're good to go there. We just need to hopefully find some more horrors and have some fun. Okay, well, turn 1 we draw Cavern of Souls, which is certainly great. The only problem is I have no untapped black source turn 1 for Bloodchief Ascension. So I think I just got to toss something in tapped, unfortunately. Right? This can only get me blue. This comes in tapped, and this can only get me black for casting a horror, right? So unfortunately, no black turn 1. I was going to say, I don't know that it's that big of a deal, but we do see Silent Hall Creeper, which is a very interesting horror. It can't be blocked. Whenever it hits a player, you choose one that hasn't been chosen this turn, 2 counters on it, draw a card, or have it become a copy of another creature you control. Hall Creeper is very good, right? It's one of those cards that when you have it become a copy of another thing, can give you a really another key copy of another effect. What I think I want to do here is go for the Ascension. My thought here is that the Silent Creeper is great. I want to try to work my way towards getting the Nagathron down, because I think it's where almost all of our game plan survives around, or really profits around. And I don't mind taking the turn off. If you think about it, somebody could end up proccing Bloodchief Ascension, right, on our trip around the table, and then it becomes even better. But if not, no worries. So, of course, Herald's Horn calling horror here. And we're going to pass another turn, but I think it's fine. If I, obviously have enough mana for Nagathrod next turn, but it may even make sense just to go for, like, Hall Creeper and Thing in the Ice next turn, right, instead of Nagathrod, depending on what we see, right? Because then we need them to attack, right, with Nagathod's ability to mill cards, right? So maybe it makes sense to sit back, right, Thing in the Ice, Defender. But again, maybe it'll change our line. So Herald's Horn goes off. This is not a horror, so it's going to stay on top. That's not a bad draw. It does turn on Gloom Lake Verge. Now, if I was sitting at a table where I was worried that Nagathrod might get countered, I think I could just go for Caverner Souls, right, and call Horrors, um, and be safe. But I think it just makes sense to get him in. Again, can't attack with him this turn, but I think it's fine. I think at the end of the day, we're still setting up, and being that we're playing a bracket 3 deck, I think I would feel safe in turn 4 to put my 5-mana commander out. If it catches removal, it catches removal, and they're probably fair to remove Nagathrod. It's one of those commanders that if you let it got out of hand, it's going to be brutal. All right, well, turn 5, there's a nice piece of protection for Nagathrod. Sorry, I just realized that would have been your Herald Torn trigger, and it wasn't a horror, so it comes back to our hand. Hall Creeper and Thing of the Ice both come in for 1 mana because of the Herald Torn. Or whenever we cast instant sorceries, remove those ice counters, then it flips over to return all non-horror creatures back to their opponent's hands. There's a few ways we could approach this. Well, no, I don't have triple blue for Fractured Sanity, so never mind. I was going to say these are both a single blue. There's no way I can get triple blue from those 3 lands, no matter how I do it. I think there's no way I can get triple blue. So I would say Fractured Sanity would have been really fun. Attack with Nagathrod and just Fractured Sanity here and see what we get into it. I guess we hold up the Fierce, attack with Cap. I think there's probably a world where he gets in untapped. I mean, or unblocked with having Menace. I'm not entirely sure, right? I think we just got to take the shot, hope that we mill a couple cards and get something. I mean, at the end of the day, right, we still need to think about the fact that we're building our board state, right? We're not always going to be guaranteed to be getting these great mills all the time, but we are also building Ascension. I have no way to track it at the moment because I'm sure my opponents may be attacking each other. Who knows, right? But at least we could start our way onto the Ascension. Sorry, that would have been your Herald Torn trigger. So now we do have the Fractured Sanity if we want to use it. Everybody milling 14 is huge. We would love for this to be online. So like if it takes me going through this combat to get this up to 3, like let's say somebody else lost life on one of the other turns, and I can guarantee it with Hall Creeper this turn since it can't be blocked, I would 100% take this Fractured Sanity main 2, right? We kind of, if you think about it, have no reason not to, even if we didn't have it up to 3, right? Because Hall Creeper can't be blocked, you're guaranteed the damage, and then again, Nagathrod hopefully with Menace can still put itself somewhere. Now, as far as the Hall Creeper this turn, if I make it become a copy of Thing in the Ice, it just flips over, right? But I don't think that works because it can't copy the backside. So that wouldn't make too much sense. I think it's just the counters on the Hall Creeper. And then, like I said, I'm trying to think, if the Ascension's not online, would I run this Fractured Sanity out? I feel like I would. You just have a better chance of hitting something good off your opponent's decks, especially if you know which of your opponents likely to have the best things. We've probably already milled at least 1 card, maybe more than that. But I think I do it. I mean, if the Ascension's online, everybody just lost 26, right? And that's beautiful. And that's exactly what we want to happen. If not, no worries. We still get the mill. We go to get something really huge and put it in under our control. Hullbreaker Horror that would have been your Herald Torn trigger, so we would have drawn 1 more, right? This is almost the perfect thing for Hall Creeper to come a copy of. Horror is a fantastic card, allowing us to bounce things back to opponents' hands. So that feels like a nice free cast this turn. Guess we can do it at flash speed if we want to. I think I'm willing to just run it out. And then just attack with the Hall Creeper again. This time I guess I could have become a copy of the Horror. It doesn't really matter. I think I would like to draw the card too. I'm not entirely sure. We'll just draw the card. I was going to say Horror is going to be a nice attacker next turn with Menace. Same thing with the Nagathrod. Not as many cards getting milled this turn as we did last turn, but we of course can't simulate what creature did we grab, right? And now we're in a scenario where Mind Grind is going to be particularly brutal. Right now we can Mind Grind for 4, and everybody has to mill until they hit 4 lands and put them in their graveyard. I mean, depending on your opponent's decks, that can be a lot of cards. And if this Blood Chief should now be online, if it wasn't online last turn, that could be a ridiculously large number. And then if we manage to get into a land next turn, now we're in Breach the Multiverse territory. So you could start to see where, like, obviously a good piece like the Ascension can set us up a ton of value, but it's important to note the pieces we're trying to lock in around it, right, to get some value. Well, let's get into playtest number 2 here. Keeping a 3-lander with that talisman. So there's 4 out of the 5 mana we need for Nagathrod. But of course, we see everybody's favorite insert creature type here, Roaming Throne. Roaming Throne is great with Nagathrod, like it is with most commanders, because you double his ability to have opponents mill whenever a horror hits them, and you double the ability to get something back on end step. So kind of a win-win so many ways, right? Hunted Horror is a very interesting one. So it's a big 7/7 with trample. You give an opponent 2 centaurs when it comes in, but you don't have to attack the player you gave the centaurs to, right? So you could just potentially guarantee a big attack against somebody else. Sludge Monster is really interesting. Whenever it comes in or attacks, you put a slime counter on a target on up to one other target creature, and then non-horror creatures with slimes on them lose all their abilities. Good way to lock key combo pieces down, lock people's commanders down. Really interesting with Sludge Monster, but I like this one. I mean, Roaming Throne's always something you want to see, and Hunted Horror does give us a nice other turn play. Here we see Toxrill. Toxrill, of course, is a horror. Toxrill is a great commander in its own right. The version I have proxied of Toxrill is Gary, just because I think that that printing's still hilarious to me. But Toxrill's an absolute unit in itself. It's one of those things we'd happily take on the board because it does so much value, right? I think we'll get the Fetid Pools in. I don't think we really have much else to do here on turn 1, and I think I'm content just to take the tap land. Turn 2, we see a counter spell. Not bad to have a counter play in hand. I think I'll go for the Talisman here, forego playing the Hunted Horror for the Talisman, just to give us a little bit of extra ramp. Unfortunately, this Fabled Passage is going to have to come in tap, but it's nice because we draw another piece of counterplay. So I'm kind of thinking of cracking the Fabled Passage for a Swamp. We can go 1 and 2 here for the Hunted Horror, right? But we can leave a blue up for that offer you can't refuse, just in case somebody does something crazy here on turn 3 that we need to stop. As we come into turn 4, Arenicus is great, making a copy of Nagathrod when we get there. We're just not there quite yet. I think Roaming Throne makes a ton of sense. Get it in. Hunted Horror can start attacking if we wanted to. Again, a big 7/7 with trample feels great. Again, you don't have to attack that player you gave the centaurs to, or you can, depending on how you want to look at it. The problem is those centaurs do have pro black, so they're going to be able to basically for free block Hunted Horror, so I don't know that we want to do that. Ideally, we hit a land here, and we can get Nagathrod down, but you don't always get what you want. We see Dimir sing it, which is fine. It does give us Nagathrod next turn, so we're at 3 mana this turn. I think I'd probably just leave up the counterplay. Attack with the horror again. It's not ideal to miss the land drops, right? But I think we're still in really good shape, especially because once Nagathrod comes down, we're getting more of the triggers, right? And so now this turn, right, we can get Nagathrod in. Now all the horrors have menace, so Hunted Horror is going to be harder to block, right? I think Roaming Throne can probably start attacking now because we obviously chose horror when it came in. If they're hitting, they're milling for twice the cards, and then Nagathrod gets to actually take twice on the bottom ability, which is pretty great. So, again, combination we love to see here between these two. Take 2 key things. Unfortunately, we did not leave up any counterplay, so I'm assuming removal for Nagathod's coming, or even for Roaming Throne. You could argue either is a relevant choice. Remember, the problem with Roaming Throne is its Ward 2 does stop it from some removal, right? People actually have to put some actual wood into it, or some actual mana into it, right, to actually get rid of it. I was gonna say, depending on what I draw here, I think Arenicus is a pretty solid choice. I'm 1 mana off of Toxrill as much as I love Toxrill. River Churn's pretty great. It's one of those artifacts that can really help us out, mainly with that exhaust ability. If you can get half your opponent's library in their graveyard, I mean, River Churn can just absolutely end the game, right? Which is good to know. I don't mind doing it, but I almost feel like Arenicus is the better option. Making a copy of Nagathrod. My thought here is then you have the counterplay to hold up some of the either counterplay for this or removal for Nagathrod. And now, I mean, these all can attack. You're getting more of the mill, and I think we're just probably home free. We have the counterplay to keep up, and next turn we can just continue to keep the counterplay up, and our opponents have to have more than 3 ways to either wipe our board or remove Nagathrod, and I think we're just in good shape on that one. Again, you never know, but the hope is there. You steal something good, right, and you vibe on it. If you're in the chat, talk to me. I'd love to see what you think in the chat. Remember that Nagathrod, like I said earlier, is coming out. The video will be out this week if you want to see my thoughts on it for the brew, but this is just the version I decided to try for myself. All right, kind of a weird one here. A 3-lander with a bounce land. Remember, bounce lands are dangerous. You don't want to play a bounce land on turn 2 if you haven't played more than just a land, because then you're going to bounce a land back to your hand and end up forcing yourself to discard. So this could be a little bit awkward. We do see Night Howler gets bigger with the amount of creature cards in all graveyards. A pretty fun one. We see Zelix. Zelix is a great way to make some creature tokens whenever a player mills one or more creature cards. That's great. And then we see one half of the infamous combo right in Maddening Cacophony, and we see that Herald's Horn again. Not bad. Ideally, we get to draw another land so that we're not stuck in the problem of Dimir Aqueduct, and we did, so that's nice. I don't think running out the Cacophony makes very much sense, right? We see Roaming Throne. Interesting. I do this, bounce a land back. I can't really do very much, can I? Herald's Horn? Herald's Horn can't reduce Roaming Throne because remember, it doesn't gain the ability till it hits the battlefield, but this could reduce the Zelix and the Night Howler. So I could go like that next turn and get the Zelix down. If I draw an untapped land, I can just get Nagathrod down, right? So I think that makes the sense. That line makes the most sense to me. If we do Zelix, we could still hold up the hybrid, which doesn't, feel too bad. We look at the top, it's not a horror, so it stays on top, but it's almost arguably exactly what we wanted to get Nagathrod in. Next turn, same thing. We look at the top, it's not a horror, but it is a lance. That's great. We could get the Aqueduct down if we want to this turn, but man, I almost feel like it. Maybe this is the turn to do it. Bounce the Swamp back to our hand and tap that before we bounce it to play the Roaming Throne, right? So now we've got that double privilege going online, right? Nagathod's going to attack. It has Menace. Hopefully that means it can get through. If it does, great. We might be able to get something really nice off of it. Otherwise, I think I'm willing to just wait out. My thought was playing the land and just going like Zelix and holding up the removal. But I don't think I mind that line, especially since next turn we're going to have more mana, right? Deadly Relic is not a horror, so we're going to go ahead and bring that to hand. 6 mana total here. And that feels great. Zelix is just 2. Night Howler would be 2, or we could bestow it onto like Nagathrod if we want to. I actually kind of would rather just have it down as another attacker since it's going to have Menace with Nagathrod on a future turn. Note Zelix is now going to double trigger because of the Roaming Throne, so we have a potential chance to just be printing 1/1 horrors this turn. These can both attack. They both have Menace. And we should, 1, black, blue. We should be able to hold up that Rapid Hybrid and the Deadly Relic, right? For having cap out. And I think we're in a good spot. People are probably going to mill. We hopefully inevitably make a couple 1/1s here because of somebody milling. I mean, obviously, if you're going to attack different players, right? To make sure you have a chance of milling the most people and getting the most value. I realize that I should say that we probably shouldn't run Night Howler out if nobody has a creature in their graveyard. It might make sense to wait and run the Night Howler out after combat if you're worried about no one. Right? If nobody has a creature, why would you run this why would you make this a 0/0, right? So like obviously if no one had it, main 1, attack, see if you can mill, and then run out Night Howler. Obviously I wouldn't just run it out there if it was a 0/0. But again, I don't mind this spot. You have Maddening Cacophony, which we could kick next turn to just get a bunch of things into the yard if we needed to. We also just have to remember that we can just run Maddening Cacophony out at any time. We don't have to have Nagathrod out. We don't have to have these value pieces out. We could just mill half our opponents, half their library rounded up if we want to. Good for something like Night Howler, right? But interesting line there. I think we'll stop on this one. I think we've kind of got what we needed to out of that one. But it's interesting to kind of see Zelix with Roaming Throne. It's awkward that we've seen Roaming Throne multiple times already. Hopefully we can get in some playtests where we don't see it. But let's get into playtest number 4 here. Again, if you're in the chat, say hi. I'd love to chat with you. 5-lander here with Mindcrank and Uchlan. Uchlan's probably one of my favorite horrors in this deck. It's an odd one. So its power is equal to the number of crabs, oozes, or horrors you control. At the beginning of your end step, you can exile a creature card from an opponent's graveyard, and if you do, you just make a copy of it. I just love the idea that you get to pay off milling your opponents by exiling their creatures to make more copies of this monstrosity and hit them with them, hopefully with Menace, right, with the Gathron. All right, well, we love seeing Blood Chief's Ascension, of course. That was a card we've talked about. We talked about at the beginning, and we saw in that first playtest working out really well for us. I like the idea of the Mind Crank, but maybe it's worth, getting this in and getting it started. Eater of the Dead is a really interesting card. This is a part of a 2-card combo with Phoenix, which doesn't technically mill all your opponents out, but it can get very close. If it's tapped, you can exile a creature card from a graveyard and untap it. So again, works really well with Phoenix. If we see it, great. Otherwise, it's a 3/4 that can be a nice threat for us. So here I think it's either Mind Crank or we could leave up Aboleth Spawn. Very interesting card. Whenever a creature entering the battlefield under opponent's control would cause a triggered ability to trigger, we can copy that ability. Kind of interesting. I think you could make your argument about which makes the most sense to play here, whether it's Mind Crank or the Spawn. I like the Spawn. I think it's a great creature, but I ideally want to do Uchalan next turn into, well, I need to untap land to go Uchalan into Nagathrod, right? So it might make more sense to go with the Reef this turn into Mind Crank, right? Then we're guaranteeing the, Uchalan into Nagathrod line, right? And then there you go. Now you have that line going. So that makes more sense to me in my head, especially needing to play around that tap land coming in. Now Uchalan can attack this turn. It's just a 2/4, but you never know. We could pick up a counter on the Ascension, get a couple cards milled, and kind of work our way that way. And here, getting into the next turn, we have Glimpse, which can be particularly brutal, milling somebody for 10. I mean, I think ideally you pick the person you want the most. If somebody had a creature in their graveyard, we can make a copy of Uchalan. Maybe we end up doing that, right? I mean, they're just such great attackers with Menace from the Gathrod. Crippling Fear could help wipe the board if we want it to. Pick horrors. Everything that's not a horror gets -3/-3, depending on what you're playing up against. Could help lead the way for these Uchalans, right, to get in. I don't think we mind paying the 4 mana for that because you can keep up the offer just in case. And I think we've seen in Playtest 1 this line work itself out. Bloodchief Ascension just becoming particularly brutal once it goes online. And then Glimpse, right, really brutal with that Bloodchief Ascension, as well as these horrors that are just going to keep on growing. Let's do one more with Nagathrod. As much as I love Nagathrod, it definitely tends to be fairly linear, right? And so I still wanted to show it off, show the fun I've been having behind the scenes with it. Like I said, we'll get to see more this week when the video comes out. But all right, keeping the 2-lander here, fetch land so we can go get shock, surveil land, whatever we want to do. Dark Ritual can help us get Nagathrod out quicker. We see the Soul Ring. We see Alter the Brood, a really fun one whenever a permanent comes into our control. Target opponent mills a card. I mean, we can go Soul Ring into Alter, right? So we're getting a lot out turn 1. Makes me really want to go with something like Polluted Delta this turn to get some mill, but does it make the most sense? If I go Dark Water, I guess I need the black source, right, to be able to play Dark Ritual. But then that's in a Gathrod this turn, right? So turn 2. And then no mana left over for anything else, but I think that's well worth it on turn 2. Then do the fetch land, right? Fetching for pretty much, I think, anything. I kind of like the idea of something like Undercity Sewers just to kind of see what's coming up. I think the Obliterator is perfectly fine. We don't have the quad black for it. We throw it in the yard for now. And then what? Spark Double Nagathrod is my thought. Now you have double the mill. Get in with Nagathrod for some mill. We've already milled, 1 for the Delta, 2 for the Sewers, 3 for the Spark Double. So there's probably a chance we've got something good in the graveyard already, even if our opponents block Nagathrod, right? And I think we're just off to the races here. Next turn, we can add something like Defiler of Flesh to give our creatures a little bit of a buff, get things down cheaper. If we can find some mana, we could potentially get ourselves into something like Toxrill. But again, you never know what you hit off your opponents, right? You may be able to just hit something really good. But I mean, you get double the returns back with double Nagathrods. And I think we're just in, good shape on that one. I know that Mill's a very polarizing deck type, but I think it's good to pursue these things, especially for me as a brewer, because it's important to know that styles of decks can be very different on how you brew them. I think I just like Nagathra because it's still a creature deck like I know and love, but it adds those extra pieces, right, in being a mill deck and having a good time. As a little bit of nugget for anyone that's here and watching that wants to know, I'm actually going to be updating Hope from Final Fantasy as well with Space Time Anomaly and that kind of thing. Really, I'd done Hope first, and I'm like, man, what's another mill deck that we can do to kind of take advantage of some of this new support? And that's where I landed back on the Gathrod, and that's what made me want to do it. So both of those will be coming in the coming weeks, and I hope you guys, enjoy those episodes when they get out. But let's talk about the deck I'm more excited to talk about, one of my personal favorites. Let's talk about Jetmir, Nexus of Revels. Jetmir is a deck that can be punishingly fast or a great mid-range deck, depending on the hand that you keep. But the goal of the deck remains the same. Get yourself to 9 creatures to take advantage of Jetmir's ability. When you control 3 more creatures we control get +1/+0 and Vigilance. At 6, you add an additional +1/+0 and Trample. And at 9, you add an additional +1/+0 and Double Strike. Double Strike and Trample are already 2 particularly brutal abilities to add together, but the importance of Jetmir is that you take 1/1s and make them 4/1s with Double Strike and Trample, becoming a whole lot more of a threat to your opponents. And traditionally, what I will do with Jetmir is I will not deploy Jetmir until I know I have time to use, until it's the time to use it. Mainly just because you don't want to make Jetmir cost 6 or 8 mana unless you have to. The deck kind of relies on hitting your curve, getting good things out, and then getting Jetmir in at the right time. Because remember that you don't need 9 creatures attacking; you just have to control 9 creatures, which is the huge difference. And we're gonna use things that make tokens on attack. You have things like Anok Strike Leader, Adeline, right? These things that make tokens tapped and attacking when they attack. You have things like a Nimpakal and some of these goblins like Krenko, right, that just make tokens when they attack. Again, the point is that you just need to get to 9 so that you can have Jetmir give you the fullest abilities you can and get yourselves into combat. So with that in mind, let's rock into our playtest. Let's have some fun. If you're in the chat, I'd love to chat with you. Let me know what you think of the playtest we did already with Nagathra, or let me know what you think of Jetmir. Let's hop on in. Here we're looking at a 3-lander, which is good. We have some interesting pieces. We have the Skull Clamp, which can help us draw. Queen Alanal is a card I've always loved for this deck. Power and toughness equal to the number of creatures I control. Again, great. This is an ability that I've really been looking into more going forward. Started to kind of eye these creatures that have this ability. The new Suki from Avatar has this ability, but also makes an ally tapped and attacking whenever it attacks. You have things like Shauna, Rico Bummycorn, Beauregard Mentor, Zergo's Vanguard, Wayfarer Temple. There's these cards that have this ability, smaller raiders, rumblers, that I think are really interesting, and I kind of want to play around with this space. And that's my goal for the next iteration of Jetmir. So again, very good card, and it adds on top of that the ability that whenever you make 1 or more tokens, you make a 1/1 soldier as well. So again, a great ability. Frontline Rush adds a nice double duty to our deck. It can either make you 2 goblins in case you just need them to hit the 9 threshold, or the ability that I want to use, the Frontline Rush, the more, you can give a creature a buff or excess number of creatures you control. This is particularly brutal if Jetmir's out, right? You think about it. You're adding that buff on top of Double Strike and Trample for a really good time. And then one of the things that I think makes Jetmir as good as it is X spells that make tokens. Because if you see them early game, you can do them for a couple, but late game, these become particularly great. Fourth Orling is probably one of the best ones because it makes tokens with haste. And that's a big deal because Jetmir doesn't hand out haste, right? I think it'd be hugely broken. It would be worse if it did. More broken, I mean. And I think Fourth Orling is just great in that it makes those 2/2s with haste so that you can attack the turn they come in. I think we're going to be doing a little bit of setup here, but I don't think we mind getting ourselves towards, I think, something like Queen Alanal to start making those soldiers. This is not going to be a, turn 4 Jetmir and swing type game, and I think that's okay. Turn 2 here, we could hold up the rush if we want to. We could still clamp them. We also draw King Darien, which buffs all of our other creatures by +1/+1 and can sacrifice itself to protect all your tokens. This, I guess, could be a scenario where I think about frontline rushing for 2 goblins. At minimum, I guess it opens up drawing off the clamp. I think next turn I'd still play the Alanol. So I guess the question is, what do we do the turn after that? Verge into the 4th Orlingas, right? I mean, there's a question there. Or you wait till after the Alanol's down to get the extra soldier. I don't think I mind getting the goblins in. Like I said, at minimum, it just gives me extra draw next turn if I choose to do that. Well, that was probably one of the better things we could have drawn into, and a reason we might want to keep the goblins around in Howl Squad heavy. So I've tried to pack this mini goblin sub synergy in the deck, mainly between things like Legion Warboss and Goblin Rebelmaster that make you a goblin every turn that has to attack, Krenko, and then, General Crete, which makes the goblin when you attack. These with Howl Squad Heavy kind of work together to be this nice little group of creatures that are going to make these goblin tokens and allow us to swing with them. The other thing I like about the Heavy is it makes a goblin every turn that has haste, and it has to attack this turn if able. So this one at minimum has to attack, the other two don't. But remember that Howl Squad Heavy does turn our speed online. There are very few cards in this deck that care about speed, but it's important to note that for Howl Squad Heavy's ability, we do care, right? Because tapping for a red for each goblin we control is a huge ability, right? So we really lucked into the frontline rush into the Howl Squad on that one. My hope is on turn 3 we can up our speed. I guess we really don't know, right? It's going to come down to what our opponents have. And then we can't, right, obviously clamp that turn because we don't have enough mana left. Here I really want to get Alanol down, right? Because then when you make that goblin, right, you're making that soldier. I could play the Hushwood Verge if I want to clamp one of the goblins after combat to draw a couple cards, or the soldier, which doesn't seem like a terrible idea. But get the Alanol in, make a goblin, get the soldier. You'll note we're getting pretty dangerously close to 9. And in fact, if our opponents really don't have much of a response, or we're not worried about it, I think Jetmir will be the perfect play next turn, because we're at 7 creatures this turn. Jetmir would be 8, and then the goblin and the soldier off the heavy and the Alanol would be 10, and we'd be at the perfect number, right? But again, get in, take the attacks. If we want to get rid of the soldier, we can. The only problem is then we would still be at the perfect number next turn, but that's if they don't, our opponents don't respond or do anything to our board state. I think it's going to come down to what your opponents have, but I don't mind clamping, just because I think you get yourself access to some better things. But again, this turn, if my opponents don't have anything and I'm not worried about it, like I said, you run Jetmir out, we're at 7, Goblin and Soldier make 9. And again, all of these can attack because it made this with haste. The Howl Squad Heavy won't give the soldier haste, so the soldier and Jetmir will be the only 2 things that can attack. Otherwise, you have a 9/9 Queen Alanol that's a 12/9 because of Jetmir are going to do brutal damage, and you're going to guarantee to turn your speed on this turn. We do technically have a mana left. If we did it the right way, we could put something like Boromir in just to protect the board, or do something like that with the mana from the Howl Squad Heavy, because remember, they all have Vigilance because of Jetmir. So nice turn 5 Jetmir. We got there, right? We didn't think we would, but we got there with the Heavy, and hopefully we can maneuver ourselves. Probably guaranteed to take at least 1 player out this turn, maybe 2, depending on how these goblins swing. Remember, each of them are effectively 8 damage with the Double Strike and Trample, again, minus what your opponents block with. So 5 of them are 40, right? But again, it depends on what your opponents have. Alanol being a 12/9 represents 24, right? So she's going to really go after somebody, and maybe we can, again, find a way to knock at least 1, maybe put a dent on a second one and really force them to deal with the board. That's why I kind of like going with the Heavy into Boromir here, just to give the whole board indestructible. We have no problem giving up Boromir for it, just to guarantee that we untap and literally could just go to combat, make the goblin and the soldier, and just keep going. Or you could get a little bit cheeky and go with something like fourth Orling as if your opponents managed to play a bunch of blockers. But that just goes to show you where Jetmir can really turn itself up to 11 pretty quickly if you can get the right pieces in line. And that's what I built the deck to do, and I think it shines there on that one. Here we're keeping a 3-lander with Bloom Tender, good way to get some mana. Go-Go Mysterious Mime might look odd, but, start your combat, it becomes a copy of another creature you control, except its name's Go-Go, and it and that creature each get +2/+0 in haste. Go-Go is really just here to copy a lot of other creatures in the deck. It's a great copy into something like Adeline or a Nymphicall or something like that makes tokens on attack. At maximum, it's a great thing to copy Jetmir. And not only that, but Jetmir gets haste, right, when Go-Go copies it, because they both get haste, and that's great, right? Getting a +6/+0 buff instead of +3/+0, and just, finding more favor there. But here, I think I'm going to try to, I was going to say, I'm thinking the Foothills makes the most sense to start with. Just in case we manage to, I do have a lot of deck, lands in the deck, like the Verges and the check lands that care about land types. So I think it makes sense to get the Triumph out early. Especially because then you can get the Bloom Tender right in on turn 2. There's probably the argument that you could do Strike Leader too, because Strike Leader next turn could start making those goblins, which would be really effective. Because I guess unless we draw an untapped land, we're at 3 mana next turn, right? If I put this in tap, we're at 3 mana. My only thought is, well, I guess you could go Anok and then tap for green-white, but we'll see what we draw. Maybe it changes our mind. I could see the argument for Anok this turn. And then next turn, going into the Bloom Tender and printing the goblins, then you're at 5 creatures. And you would be a turn 4 Jetmir play for a solid attack, as long as the Anok Strike Leader sticks around, right? Because we don't even need the 4th land at that point. So that line probably it's the aggressive line, right? Whereas I think Bloom Tender is the safe line. You're kind of getting more mana for next turn. So let's go with the safe line just to see where it takes us. No mana on that, but I almost feel like Strike Leader is still the play. We can't get Rabble down this turn, but man, it would net me 1 goblin this turn. Strike Leader, I think, nets me more in the long run, which is why I think I like the Strike Leader instead. Remember, Strike Leader can also sack itself to protect the tokens. Just nothing we can do for 2 mana. Coming to this turn, if I play Rabble, now this taps for Naya. What does that do me? I guess you could 4th for 1, but that doesn't make much sense. I could Totentans for 2, and this gets me pretty darn close to just a great Jetmir attack next turn. 3, 4 goblins this turn and 2 rats. I mean, you're at 9, and the question is, does the board survive to turn 5 where you play Jetmir, get 3 more goblins from the Strike Leader, and just go off, right? What makes the most sense? Alternatively, we have 6 mana. You could go, for something like Perforos if you want to go for more of the dealing damage to our opponents this turn line. Because if you think about it, this is 4 goblins this turn on this attacking in this combat. That's 8 damage with Perforos. So you could go Perforos and then just like sneak a rat in if you wanted to. Or if we don't use this white, we could go Perforos and the Flowering of the White Tree if we want to give all of our creatures a little bit of buff, maybe better protect that Strike Leader of this combat, would be my thought. So that's a Goblin with the Round Master, 3 on the attack for the Strike Leaders. Like I said, that's 8 damage. Then you come back to our turn, we're guaranteed, as long as Strike Leader survives, we're guaranteed 9 creatures with Jetmir, right? So, I mean, that makes sense. If Strike Leader doesn't survive, we're at 6 creatures, Jetmir 7, Rabble would only be 8, but remember, we could then Bloom Tender for 2 here off the Totentans, or 1 off the Orlingas, and that would be 9. So I think that pretty much shows that line there. I'm not going to simulate, honestly, too far past the 9, because, like, the assumption is we're going to pick the right player to attack and do the damage, and then, keep the party rolling. The thing I guess I like about this board state is Strike Leader can protect the tokens, right, if need be. Keep them alive. Again, this turn, right, you're getting 4 more. 8 more damage off the Perforos alone. And then 16 damage off of Perforos over 2 turns really softens your opponent's life totals up more than you think it will, especially with all the things involved. And that just feels good. We're 1 mana off going for Go-Go into, Jetmir and Go-Go, but I think that's fine. I think we did more than enough to establish that we've got some nice attacks that turn in. I kind of feel like maybe it made sense to take that safe line there versus the aggressive line, just in case somebody had some key removal, and we got to see Perforos and kind of got vindicated for that decision. Four lander on this one with Arid Mesa, so a way to go get our Triome. There's the Farseek for our ramp. We see Mondrak. I don't play a ton of doublers in the deck, mostly because I want the deck to be a little bit faster. The reason I'll play Mondrak is because it's a creature, so it does count for the 9. Azika's Chariot's a ton of fun, comes in and makes the 2 cats, and then when it attacks you, make another copy of a token, so it can really help you get to that 9 pretty quickly. I was going to say, I think I'm willing to just crack the Mesa. Important here, because then we know that Rootbound Crag can come in untapped, even though we had the Stomping Ground. Turn 2... we see Scurry of Squirrels. Myriad is something that I've tried to play around with in the deck, because you're guaranteed those copies attacking your opponents. The only thing I like about Scurry of Squirrels is double Myriad. So you attack one player and you're getting 2 copies attacking the other player. So if you think about it, you're getting like 4 extra creatures each combat. And then whenever the Scurries hit, they put a counter on a creature control. Note that if they have double strike, they can put the counters on before regular strike, which is always an interesting thing to keep in the back of your mind. I think I like just the Rootbound plus the Farseek. Don't know that it particularly matters what we go get here. Again, we're just building up towards that. Mural is great. Mural's a great option. I was thinking about going for Mondrak, but I think Mural makes the most sense. Protect us on our turn, could start making those soldiers. This is going to come in tap. This comes in untapped. Does it make a difference? I have Mondrak mana. I have Azika's Chariot mana. What gives me the biggest line? Alanol only makes me 1 extra soldier. Chariot makes me 2 cats. And I think just develops the board a little bit better than I want. So 2 there. Mural attacks making the soldier, right? We're leading ourselves into a really nice turn this turn with crewing the Chariot, making a copy. So we're at 4 creatures. Mural's going to guarantee us going up to 6 on its attack. Chariot would be 7, Jetmir would be 8. The token that Chariot makes would be 9. So we are at 9 this turn if we cast Jetmir and crew the Chariot. Does it make sense to take any other lines? Elspeth would also be a really fun one to get down this turn. There's our other doubler. Of course, gives the option for flying, which is a huge deal, right? On the 0. I think I still like this line. Crew the Chariot with Jetmir. Go to attack. Mural's going to make 2 soldiers, right? Chariot attacks. I don't think it matters. I guess the soldier probably makes the more sense that Mural can start making more soldiers. I just realized that no one can counter Jetmir, so that's obviously the play, because they can't cast spells on their turn. They would have had to have gotten rid of Mural. So here you go. These 2 are attacking. Right. These 2 are these 4 are attacking with that buff. And then, obviously if we get in another turn, Mondrak certainly makes some sense. I'm trying to think of what makes the most sense to guarantee the damage. I guess it's Elspeth, right? Because each of these are now 4s, so just one of them can crew the Chariot. Use 0, just giving them all flying. Then you're getting more soldiers, and you're getting more of the copies. I mean, that makes more sense to me than anything else, right? And I mean, you hopefully knock the 1 player out last turn, and you're going to knock, hopefully, the other 2 out this turn, especially giving them all a counter and flying, right? I think it's easy to probably view that as a little Christmas landy, but I think you have to remember that, like, the goal of this deck is to play the mid-range game, where you're trying to kind of be at your pieces before people have their boards set up. And so swinging a bunch of 4/1s with double strike at somebody on turn 4 or 5 is just not something most decks can handle, and that's what we're trying to operate our window within. I really like this hand. So we're just 1 white mana off of Adeline. But again, Charismatic Conqueror is great. Really helps shut down our opponents. Can hopefully net us a couple vampires. And I think we're just in good shape. I mean, all we need is a white source. Perfect. I was going to say, all we need is a white source, and this hand is almost perfect. So we'll play the Canopy Vista. Nothing we can do on turn 1. Get the untapped land in for the Conqueror. Remember, Conqueror gives our opponents the choice. Whenever an artifact or creature would come in untapped, they can either tap it or give us a 1/1. Again, we want the 1/1s. We want our opponents to hand us the 1/1s, but, not always guaranteed. I think Sundown Pass into Adeline. I'd love Charismatic Conqueror to be able to attack here to get me the humans, but I don't know that I want to put it out in harm's reach. But if we got any number of those vampires, the vampires are attacking. I don't care if they die. They're going to make me 3/1/1 humans off of Adeline. And going from 2 to effectively 5 with the humans on board, again, depending on, whether or not our opponents can block them, is a huge deal, because now land plus Jetmir plus Adeline's attack, if none of these humans die, is 9. So this is the important line for my thought process here, is if I've got at least 1 vampire, this is now the line I want to be at. Adeline can attack if we can get her in safe, right? Or sorry, no, she came in the stern, so we can't attack with her, but we could attack with that vampire. If I have to give up the Conqueror, does it make sense? Does it make sense to give up the Conqueror? Jetmir plus Adeline, that'd be 5, 8 off the humans. I don't know that I like that line the same. But again, if you have that 1 vampire, I think this is the perfect line. My gut tells me that Conqueror's got to give us at least 1 vampire. Worst case scenario, everybody's tapped down, and then just Conqueror gets the free attack, right? I mean, you got to think about it that way as well, right? That you could just be walking into the perfect attack, that way. Like I said, then it's just Jetmir plus 3 more humans off of Adeline. These are all 4/1s attacking different players. Like, we can't control this. We could either double up and have it just be 2 4/1s attacking everybody. We could, again, try to focus down 2 particular players or 1 particular player with all of these. Maybe we gain a few more vampires. And I think this is just a great line. And if we get the next turn, it's just something like Strike Force, giving all of our other creatures melee. They're going to get the melee, right, because of Adeline's ability. And we can just declare attacks at everybody, giving them +3/+3. So now they're effectively +6/+3 off the melee and Jetmir's ability. And we're just in great shape. I think this is what I like the most about Jetmir, is just he's finding those lines to 9. And a lot of times what happens at my personal play group is someone goes, wait, why are you casting Jetmir here? And then we get to comment, they're like, oh, that's why. You're doing some of this math. You're doing the attacking math. That's what I built this deck to do. Do the attacking math. You're trying to figure out, okay, am I at 9? How do I get to 9? What's my route? And kind of building these scenarios up here. All right, kind of ramp heavy hand, right? 1, 2, 3 lands in the Saga. We see Miro, we see multiple ramp pieces, and we have Court of Calling. Court of Calling is one of those cards that is interesting in this deck. I mean, I'm not playing Cradle Hoof, I'm not playing anything like that, but there's a lot of things you can go get with Court of Calling. Adeline, there's a lot of things that just print tokens on attack. So there's a lot of arguments for what you could go get with Court of Calling. I think Saga makes the most sense. Turn 2, I thought was the Nature's Lore. That goes and gets me Jetmir Garden. When this goes away for Soul Ring, I can at least still get the Rootbound Crag in, is my thought, or I can still get some of these lands in. Right, because that's 2 there. And then this turn, the 3rd one's going to go off. And like I said, I do believe the only legal target I have for this is Soul Ring in the list. And then my thought would be either Rootbound Crag or Rockfall Vale. It really doesn't matter, either of them coming untapped. And I'd probably just go for Mural, right? Get it down, get it started, start protecting us on our turn. Now we're at 6 mana. I love the idea of Darian plus Toby. Remember, Toby makes that beast, 4/4 beast, and then whenever we control 4 more tokens, right? All of our tokens have flying. We picked up that extra soldier for Mural, so it's going to be making 2 soldiers this turn when it attacks. Now we're in good shape. Just one token away, 6 creatures on board. Jetmir would be 7, right? Mural attacking would be 10. So that is the line. I think in my head. Four there. Does my 3 other mana do anything for me? Not that I can think of. I think it's just, again, go to combat, attack. We have 4 soldiers, so we're making 4, right? These are the ones that can attack. All these all now flying. And again, you still get the buffs. And again, knock one player out. Be very prepared to knock somebody else out. Remember, Darian can protect all of the tokens, so the tokens are going to be safe, leaving us with 7 there. If somebody does truly wipe the board, I think Jetmir just comes back in next turn and lets these 7, tokens just go off to the races. I think we're looking pretty good on that one. Again, a lot faster on these playtests, but I think you have to remember, like, that's kind of the point of the deck, right? Is getting these mid-rangey lines where you're trying to get yourself there as quick as possible and creating the scenarios where you can get that first player gone and then just work on the other 2 from there. And I think a lot of that just comes down to deciding who's the biggest threat towards you specifically, and then, make it happen. Let's do one more playtest here. Thank you all for watching tonight. If you have anything you want to say, drop it down in the chat. I'd love to hear what you had to think. But 3-lander here. Voice of Victory is great. Legion's great. The Infantry Shield's great. I really like this hand. It's going to take a little bit to get up to it, but I don't think we mind at all. Crack that Arid Mesa for the garden. I think the garden's a great place to start, right? Turning on both of these check lands. Urza Saga might pretty much immediately change my line, right? Turn 2. I guess I could make the construct. Here. I actually haven't really thought of that. I really just thought about dumping in Warboss here. Getting the Goblin. I don't know if Voice attacks this turn, but the point there is to protect that. Possum says, what's your goal power level for both of these? Both of these, to me, Jetmir is for sure a bracket 3 deck. There are no 2-card combos in the deck that would make it a bracket 4 deck. I still think this deck probably punches above its weight class into bracket 4. I would happily play this deck in bracket 4, but as it's designed, it's a bracket 3 deck. It has 3 game changers. I don't think the game changers matter. Truthfully, I think I could take the game changers out and this deck would remain the same as good as it is. Saga is just one of those cards that picks up a nice extra piece of value when you see it. Is Saga even a game changer? It's not. That's crazy. Does this deck have no game changers? I could have swore it had one. Wow. Okay. As far as Nagathra that we started with, that's probably the bigger argument of it probably could be classified as a 4 because of Bruvac and Mad Ink Cacophony. But I don't have any way to search either of them. So my argument would be it would be high bracket 3. 2-card combos are really hard to judge because it comes down to how early do you realistically expect to have them. And the answer in the Nagathra deck is, well, I don't. I mean, I'd have to see both of them. Same thing with Phoenix plus Eater of the Dead. I mean, it's technically a 2-card combo, but it does have a little bit of variance to it. But again, I don't expect to see both of them. So to me, I would classify both of these as bracket 3 as they sit. Like I said, Jetmir I'd happily play in bracket 4. I think it's a strong deck. It's a strong mid-range deck, and I trust the deck enough, and I have enough reps with it that I would probably play it up a little bit. But of course, as you go up into bracket 4, you expect a lot more combos. You expect a lot more tutoring, right? So your expectations of the games change. But again, I'd probably say both of these are, the goal is 3. Although, like I said, Jetmir, I think I'd comfortably play at 4. I also have no want to add game changers to Jetmir. Truthfully, I mean, yeah, they'd be good, but my brand of Jetmir is so, I guess, trying to be fast that I mean, sure, tutors are great, but I just try not to play with them if I can help it. And so I can't think of a game changer at the moment that would make Jetmir better. Now, if Urza Saga goes on the game changer list, I mean, I could take it out. It's not that big of a deal to me. I mean, most of the time you're just using the Saga for the Soul Ring, but there are times where I've used it for the construct. I just can't think of a game changer off the top of my head that plays the. This is an odd term for people who who aren't sports fans, but I can't think of a game changer that just plays the brand of hockey that I want for this deck. Like, I think the deck does what I want it to do, and it does it efficiently. And I can't think of a game changer that would change that, and I'm okay with that. There are probably cards that I could see be at risk to become game changers in the future, and that's okay. You know, we track that line when we get there. But this deck to me is just a ton of fun. It's fast when it can be fast. It's a mid range deck when it needs to be a mid. If you know in the hands where it's a mid range deck, you could take all the fetches and shocks out of this deck and probably still have a similar experience. I've thought long and hard about cutting things like Ocelot Pride because I love the card, but like if you don't see it early, it's such an odd card. Because I don't have a ton of things in the deck that gain life, right? I hope that answers your question as far as what the intention is. Of course, I have fours in my deck box. I mean, it's not like I'm avoiding, bracket four, but just both of these decks, I'd probably classify, like I said, I'd probably classify Captain as a 3, but I'd give the caveat that the deck has combos. I just have no way to find them. The thought on Warboss this turn is to make that Goblin. If Voice has an attack, I'm gonna take it. Turn 3, there's probably a chance one of my opponents maybe only has a 1/1. And if so, there's kind of no reason not to take the mobilized attack on Voice of Victory. But my thought at the same time is like, we don't want to put Voice of Victory in threatening range because it's the thing that's going to really protect us, preventing our opponents from casting spells on our turns. So as we come into the next turn, right, the Saga goes off. We can float the colorless, right? Go for the Soul Ring. Play the retreats. We've got what, 6 mana? We might have a sneaky Jetmir play here. So no, 3 colorless. I wouldn't. No, I was gonna say the sneaky play was with Dollmaker Shot, but I can't. Right? I'd need another white. So yeah, Jetmir here would be 4 with the Goblin, 5 with the Goblin, 7 with the Warriors. So not exactly there. What makes the most sense? I mean, Elspeth seems like a great play in the next turn. You could go Infantry Shield plus the Dollmaker Shot and kind of set up for next turn. We would have to get another piece of mana for Jetmir plus the equip on the shield, though. I think Elspeth just makes the most sense. +1 to make the soldiers, right? Get the 2 goblins from the rabble, or from the war boss, right? War boss can attack, giving one of them the counters this turn, make the 2 warriors, I guess, this turn, or 4 warriors, sorry, off the mobilized 4. And I think you just Jetmir next turn, right? I mean, it seems like a pretty obvious slam dunk to Jetmir here now, because again, unless somebody removes the Voice Victory, they can't respond to Jetmir unless it's an ability. And I think now our opponents are just in trouble because you can just give everything that's currently out flying, which is better than you think it is, especially since they get the counter, right? And then you're guaranteed to get to 9 because we're at 8 at the moment. The 2 goblins are going to be 9, right? And then you're making the 4 warriors off of Voice of Victory off the mobilize. Or sorry, why did I say 4? Oh yeah, because of Elspeth. So you're making 4 off the mobilize, and then again, we're exactly where we need to be. Probably at least one person gets knocked out, if not maybe 2, depending on how you can maneuver it. But again, the caveat goes back to I'm picking the person who has the best chance of stopping me, right? They're the first person that's going to go because you need to pick the momentum into the next turn, right, to take out the rest of the table. Jetmir does have the ability to take out the table at once. I've seen it happen. It doesn't happen very often. What happens most of the time is you start siphoning off what you expect your opponents to respond with, take out the person you fear the most, and then hope that the other 2 people don't have the resources to shut off the board state that's growing. I mean, truthfully, you can remove Jetmir at this point, which would stink. I mean, hopefully we top the land to get Jetmir back in. But otherwise, I mean, Elspeth still does good work for us here, and we're in a decent board state. If Elspeth isn't there, it stinks, right? Because Jetmir is providing so much value to the board. But just like most of the time a single target removal to Jetmir can stop our plans, and it is important. But that's why I think like Voice of Victory and Mural are so important, is that it shuts off the opportunity for your opponent to do it when we're playing Jetmir on our turn, right? When we're playing Jetmir on our turn, right, then we can be safe underneath those cards. But again, those are 2 cards in 99. Right? We're not guaranteed to see them, all the time. But I'd love to know what you guys think of the decks tonight, whether it be Captain Nagathrod or Jetmir. I think both of them are really interesting decks. The Nagathrod list is something that I've been just tinkering with since I did it. Again, videos coming out this week on the videos coming out this week on the channel coming up. I'm not guaranteeing it's going to be a part of my deck box or anything like that, but it was a fun one to play. I had a ton of fun in the one or two games I did play with it. It was a ton of fun to see it work, see the fact that it does magic. It does do what I want it to do. I did get to see some really cool interactions with the deck, and I hope that maybe I can catch some more games soon with it. But Jetmir is a deck, again, I love. I'm so excited to work with it in the future. Again, I've put a lot of thought into these creatures that get bigger for each creature you control. I think they're something that I'd like to see if maybe I can interact with some more. I think what I'll probably do is try to make a copy of the deck that interacts with these more and see what they bring as value to the deck, to see if I can make something out of it. My thought is, I mean, Suki's really fun because you add that ally and when it attacks. Of course, we're 4 months off of Suki, so obviously I can't play with that house money just quite yet. Smaller Rumblers is a card I think is really interesting because of that myriad. Getting 2 copies of it that are attacking other opponents is just, it seems brutal, especially when you think the fact that it grows. Myriad's something I really wanted to play with in the deck, but I just have yet to find good non-legendary bodies that you want to give Myriad. But I almost feel like maybe, these are the non-legendary bodies that you would want to give Myriad, right? Maybe these are the things that turn the tide for the Myriad, making me want to do that. I don't know. I can't answer that question for sure, but those are the things that are going through the back of my mind on the next round of testing, is trying to add those in and having some fun. I would love a world where we had more things like Zergo's Vanguard that has that star and mobilize, but I can understand why they don't do it. But again, I like the idea of Wayfaring Temple having the populate. This already has trample. Bunnycorn and it are just cheap. You think about it, these are 2-mana creatures that you play early and then mid to late game, they just get even better. Something like same thing with Shauna, right? 2-mana creature that just gets bigger for each creature we control. But I just want to say a quick thank you to you all. Thank you so much for coming out and watching with me tonight. The VOD will be up. It'll be back for you to play back. I appreciate y'all coming and joining. My goal is to make Let's Playtest a Sunday night tradition, so I'd love to see y'all back next week. I haven't decided quite yet what I'm going to do next week. I think we'll probably do Goreclaw to work it in there, and then I'll probably try to, again, find either a newer deck that I did for the channel. Well, we might do Shrines. I've been messing with Shrines behind the scene, obviously with some of the stuff we've seen from Avatar. Maybe we'll do that next week. I haven't quite decided yet. If you have any suggestions you want to see from either videos that were on the channel or videos or decks that I've covered that have been decks that I have in the past, I'd love to know what you think. Other than that, thank you guys so much for joining me tonight, and I will catch y'all next time.